morning, everyone, or good afternoon.
Good morning. Good morning, Daria. Let me introduce you very briefly. Thank you for being here today with us. It's a great pleasure and honor to have you here. So, that Dr. Daria Loi, she's with Avast, and she combines design strategy with participatory research to enrich people's everyday life. She's head of innovation at Avast, and some additional appointments include Democracy Lab Board of Directors, conjoint professor at Newcastle University in Australia, DCODA network supervisor, and so many others important appointments. In the past, Dr. Loy was principal engineer at Intel Corporation and head of experience and design at Mozilla. She conducted research and presented her work in most continents, published 80 more articles and papers, holds 10 and more patents, and in 2018 she was recognized as one of Italy's 50 most inspiring women in tech. So it's a big pleasure to have Daria with us today, and additional thanks for connecting so early in the morning. So Daria, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you. Well, thank you. First of all, good afternoon to everyone. I hope you are resuscitating with a good Italian coffee, which I miss, of course. And it's quite a pleasure to be here, and I'm very grateful that I was invited and had the opportunity to share with you some of my thoughts and experiences. So hopefully you can hear me okay, and you can see my screen. Can you give me a vocal? Perfect. Thank you, because
Yes,
I can't see you.
yes, we can.
Awesome, awesome. All right, so let's get started. Let me tell you a little bit about myself to start with. So, of course, my name is Daria. I'm Italian. In fact, my background is architecture. I am a graduate from Politecnico di Milano. That's where I'm from. So I started my career as an architect, but then moved in the second part of the 90s in Australia to pursue a doctorate. And during that time, while being an academic and a researcher, this is really where the time where I moved my practice from being a more traditional, I would say, architect to becoming what we call today user experience designer and researcher. Then moved to the United States, where I'm now in Portland, Oregon, on the West Coast, initially to work for Intel, where I was for about 14 years. Then moved to the non-for-profit sector for almost a couple of years in Mozilla, and now, as my kind of bio was saying earlier, I am heading innovation in the Chief Technology Office in Avast. So who I am also is really about who I am as a practitioner. So just very briefly, I like to describe myself as a data-grounded, human-centered human. And so data grounded is because I do believe that it's important to have at hand data. And let me tell you a little bit about what I mean by that. While I grew, and I kind of grew as a practitioner, as a more qualitative researcher, and therefore qualitative research is close to my heart. I also believe that it's important to triangulate qualitative research with many other types of data points, and therefore quantitative research, market research, and technology also research. And so I really do like to, I'm a data geek, let's say. I do love learning, and therefore I like to utilize that learning to fuel what I believe in, which is design of product servicing a system that are really centered around the human. And I'm a human, like everybody else in this meeting. And as part of that, being a human, I don't just have a job. I also like to engage with my fellow humans in other forms and shapes. I am very much fond of participatory design. I've been part of that community for over 20 years now, and therefore I spend some of my times in ensuring that others, be them colleagues or students or more junior practitioners, get a chance to learn more about that practice. And therefore I dedicate a lot of my time to that, because I do believe it's important to give back. I also do other stuff. I'm not just like someone that works. I like to do other things that are fun to me. So just to share that with you on the top, I do, when I get an opportunity, I like to do a lot of art. So that's actually me like several years ago now in a museum in Trento. I am a gardener and a homesteader. You see their view of my property. As you can see from the picture also, I do like vintage cars. And I'm also a family member. I have a family like all of you, and therefore I dedicate some of my time to that. And you can see there my very unusual son on the bottom. So enough about me. Now that you got a little bit of a glimpse of who I am, I chose, because of time, only one example to share with you a little bit about how I like to do things and also what I've learned over the years when you do user experience in the industry. And I chose one case study that is not particularly recent, but I believe that is useful and interesting because it gives me the opportunity to show you throughout the span of a couple of years multiple different type of techniques that I use, but also things that worked and didn't work and what I did about it. So let's get started. So you all started like in 2011, so quite a long time ago, as I said. And if you recall, that was the year where Windows 8, the operating system, now we are like moving to Windows 11, so some time has passed, was about to come out. And this was supposed to be this kind of new kind of way of looking operating system. It was designed with the perspective of being touch first. And so the idea was that really trying to bring the kind of interaction modalities that you are more, at that moment in time, people were more used to in applications and in other type of operating systems on the phone and tablets, to move them to the Windows platform. However, the plan was to have this touch-first operating system on all devices, including desktop and laptop, for instance. However, the plan at the moment in time was to really not activate necessarily the touch capability in the same way in the context of desktop and tablet and laptop, and to instead partition in a way the experience so that people would have a fully touch-first experience in the phone and in the tablet, but not so much in other devices. So when I saw the first videos at the moment in time, I had, based on my understanding of human beings, because by that time I already interviewed and worked with thousands of users in different countries, the data that I had at hand about human nature and how people look at technologies gave me this strong gut feeling, data grounded gut feeling that this was actually potentially a mistake. But when I started asking around, everybody, the answer was, well, Steve Jobs says so. And I'm not joking here, really, literally, that was the answer that people would give me. Steve Jobs says that it's a bad idea to have touch interfaces in places that are not the tablet and the phone, and therefore, why should we do it? And I felt that was not a good enough of an answer, because as I said, I like data at hand, and there was no data available. It was just like basically anecdotes and, you know, one person perspective. So what I did then, I basically, as an individual contributor, I didn't have a team at that time, and I basically had no specifically unallocated budget to do any work on this topic. But what I did, I reached out to my manager and I said, this is why I think we need to do some data collection to understand whether this is actually a good move, because we are still on time to change plans and trajectories. And I don't think we are, as a company, Intel, at that point making choices that are based on actual data. And so a lot of people thought that I was insane, but my manager luckily thought that perhaps there was something to it. And so he gave me some budget and you know, equipped with a little budget and some persistence, I decided to embark in a journey to learn more. So that was the context. So what did I do? First of all, as I said, I made the case, right? You need to make a case to secure the funds. I didn't have budget for this project. And that's how it works. If you don't have funding, you cannot do research because it costs money. And so I had to spend some time to make the case and educate myself further to secure the funds. Then, basically, I was faced with a big challenge, which was, how am I supposed to test what people would do if I'm enabled to touch the screen when the operating system is not yet available. It was not out at the moment in time. All that was available were a couple of videos on YouTube describing some instances of how the operating system was meant to work, but there was no information besides that. So what I did then, I worked with a design colleague, and what we did, we found what you see on the screen right now, a laptop. Was the only one at the moment in time that in fact had, it was an experimental laptop, didn't sell much at the moment in time because there was no interfaces for it. But basically it was a laptop that had a touch screen. And so what we did, we used that hardware, and then we basically created mock-ups of the operating system. So at the user perspective, you see them here, users that I kind of interviewed in different countries, they thought they were actually using the new operating system, but actually wasn't. Was a Flash-based animation that we created, and there were several different type of usages, right, as you see on the screen scrolling through. And that enabled me basically to create a protocol that was very specific. As you can see there, the user would be asked to, open a video, write an email, do this, do that. And while that was happening, we would tell them at the beginning that they could use any type of input modality. There was a mouse, there was a stylus, there was a touch screen, all the input modalities were at their service. And as you can see, I'm sitting there on the side, ticking boxes on a piece of paper because I created a protocol that enabled me to basically understand for every single step of the interaction what kind of input modalities are they using, right? And then afterwards, of course, we would have qualitative interviews to understand better their behavior. So that's what I did. So I did the first field work in 2 countries, came back, and when I saw the data, I almost fell off my chair. Because when I saw the data, clearly the data indicated that when users are provided an opportunity to use a touch screen, they will use it, even if it's on a laptop. So at that point, I spoke with the vice president of my organization, and I showed the data. And also he fell almost off his chair. Because obviously it was showing that all our planning in the ecosystem were completely ungrounded and wrong. So at that point, he told me, well, this is only 2 countries. What about other countries like China and Brazil, which are big markets for us? Maybe they would do something different. And my answer was, give me the money, I'll go and collect the data, and we'll find out. I don't know the answer, but I can find it. And so we go fieldwork number 2 in other 2 countries to collect more data to understand if in other type of markets with different kind of cultures, the behavior will differ. And guess what? The behavior did not differ at all. In fact, in those countries was even more touch-based. So at that point, I had plenty data, plenty data to make a strong story. And at that point, I decided to be very deliberate on how I was going to tell the story, because I knew at that point that the data was pretty explosive. It completely turned upside down potentially all the investments that my company and our partner companies were having. So I knew it was actually kind of pretty hot data. And so I knew that was important, that it was not just about the quantitative side of the data that you see on the left, but also why are people doing this? It was very important for me that the audience would understand that it's not just about the numbers of the fact that people would touch more if given opportunity. The point is understanding why are they having that behavior, why is that important to them, and what is appealing about that touch capability in that specific context, because that's what is going to give you the opportunity to design then better experiences. And so what I did was very deliberate. I basically started my presentations with what you see on the left, which was 1 image, 100 little squares. It's very clear to understand what's going on. There was no ambiguity about the data. I would start with the quantitative. And then after, once I showed the data that I knew that specific audience would kind of understand better, then I moved with the videos of users in action telling to the audience, why is this experience important for me? So I basically led with numbers and then continue with the stories, the direct voices of the people that I interviewed. And then what happened is that it became huge. Suddenly, I was asked to present to every single laptop, tablet, you name it, manufacturer, retailers, Microsoft, like every single company that has got something to do with this industry, I had to present. And of course, it was impossible. I'm one person. I couldn't be in all these countries presenting to hundreds of people 24/7. And so what I had to do at that point was basically not only to socialize, but then create training materials so that other people could go and present to all our partners, all our clients. And then I also had to start creating guidelines, because guess what? It's not just about saying people will touch the screen. And now you need to create guidelines on what kind of modalities. If you put this touch into this environment, how are we going to design the applications in this environment? Are there going to be changes in the hardware? What should we do? And so I worked then with partnering with a lot of developers, hardware and software engineers to create different guidelines. And then, basically what I did also, I partnered with Microsoft. When they saw my research, they asked me to do extra research with them. So I did actually all the research in partnership with Microsoft at that point in time of the testing ground of Windows 8 before it was launched. And in fact, all the work we did at that point together brought to the 8.1 version, which actually was launched quite quickly afterwards, because we found in that field work a lot of things that needed to be fixed. And then at that point, we've got touch on the screen, on laptops. And guess what? Once you start putting touch on this environment, a lot of different opportunities are opened up. And so at that point, we wanted to showcase what can you do once you start putting that touch screen. And so I started working in a number of different projects. Here you see on the screen one example. It was called the Tiger Cape. And this is where Tiger Cape was one of the what we call in the industry reference designs, which is Intel would create hand-to-hand working designs of new laptops with interface, with everything, right? And then there were references for our partners. In this case, for instance, the work we did for Tiger Cape ended up in products that became Dell products. And we created like these different reference design to really influence the industry towards capabilities and towards features and towards experiences that we felt, could really bring value to people. And so what you see here is the process wall on the top right. We had an entire room dedicated for the team, a team made of designers, researchers, architects, software and hardware architects, and marketing folks. So it's kind of quite multidisciplinary team. And what we did followed like a quite human-centric process, right? So we collected a lot of data from the user perspective, the market perspective. Of course, we had a lot of data from the perspective of the technology, of course, being a technology company. And then we identified the key trends in the market, you see on the bottom left, and we articulated them. They're just a poster, but then we had like a lot of documentation to showcase the key trends that at that moment in time we saw as important in the market. We then identified our target consumer based on our segmentation internally, as well as the key trends that we identified. And we started like creating short snippets of videos. We see in the bottom, in the center of describing our target consumer. And also then we started then analyzing the typical day in the life of that specific target user, and then to try to sort of tell the story about how could that day in life be different if we were to bring this new product to life. And then we moved to a more ideation phase. And what you see here, a number of things, right? You have, we created different, the classic kind of, if you like, sticky notes with ideas and concepts, the classic method. We basically utilize then different metrics to decide which one should go forward, before even going to users, because we had hundreds of ideas at the beginning. So you see on the top right, a way for us to understand which of those ideas should we consider to bring to users. And we, for instance, what you see on the top right is a way of creating metrics between the consumer value from low to medium to high in relation to the development difficulty. And once we selected a subset, we then basically created vignettes to describe those usages, and we took them to users, right? We did a user study. You see on the bottom left, one visualization of some of the usages that we had organized we had described to users in interviews and also quantitatively. And then basically we created different ways of visualizing the prioritization that users gave us in relation to all those opportunity spaces that we saw for this specific product. Once we had a bit more prioritization from the user perspective, at that point, we had the opportunity to, let's say, deepen some of those usages. So you see smart frame on the bottom center is one of those usages that then became actually intellectual property, a patent that we filed. And those was one of the usages that users basically in interview told us to be the most appealing. And I'm not quite sure why now this specific video is not working, or it is. Good. We basically prioritize, refined, and expanded. So, once you prioritize with the user study, you have got the ability now to go deeper and to refine some of those experiences in depth in relation to what the user told you and in relation to what you know that you can do at the moment in time. And then again, tell the story visually, because that, as they say, one image speaks like 1,000 words, and that's really true. And keep on doing user study. You see how there is a pattern, a lot of user studies, because as I said at the beginning, data is important, right? One thing is to have gut feeling. The other one is to actually have the data at hand to demonstrate whether or not the gut feeling was, or that hypothesis was, a good intuition. Part 5, then at that point in time, we started having clear ideas of this is the type of product that we want. These are the type of experiences that through user research, we know that the users actually really feel attracted to. At that point, we could start working from an industrial design perspective and really start crafting all those kind of conceptual understanding of the product in something actually more substantial. What you see on the bottom left is a video that we made to start visually describing how this specific product would work from the perspective of the different accessories, for instance, right? So again, this is like one way of visually telling the story about the product. In this case, it was more about the hardware perspective and the different kind of accessorization. What also happens, I learned about this by doing hardware and software combination like this specific project, is that there are about 10 weeks in the development of a product like this that are very important, in the sense that in those 10 weeks, important hardware decisions are made. And during those 10 weeks, if you don't intercept them, you will not be able anymore to change anything, right? Because they get locked in, because then you need to start going in production. And this is a problem for user experience research, because quite often it takes much more time to collect. And therefore, my frustration was in the past that during those 10 weeks, I had very little ability to influence and shift decisions based on user data, right? Because 10 weeks go fast. And so what I did about in time, I had to create a new process. It's a new process that I called 10 by 10. There is a paper out. I'm happy to share it if you're interested. But basically the idea was, I'm going to have, over those 10 important weeks of the product development, my board of advisors, of consumers advisors. So I had 10 users that for 10 weeks gave me 2 hours of the time all together in the same room. And we would literally have a board meeting where I would show them for every week, one after the other, the new development of the product, and they would give me feedback real time. We will kind of make different tools. I would use different tools to understand prioritization, motivations, where to go, and to make decisions. And so I would do the board meeting with the user, let's say on Thursday. I would create feedback for the engineering and design teams on Friday. I published the actual final report on Monday. On Monday, there will be meetings with the engineering and design team to decide how to take that information into actual practice in the design of the next step of the product. And then Tuesday and Wednesday, the engineers and the designer will be hands down, redesigning, fixing, modifying, adjusting based on user feedback. And then on Thursday morning, I will meet with them. We collect the new data on what I needed to ask my board of consumer advisors, and then I write the protocol on Thursday afternoon, interview them in the Thursday night, and then the week after again, right? For 10 weeks. Very intense, very intense. However, enabled us to do a huge amount of prototyping and refinement loops of the products in those 10 critical weeks to users, right? So I managed to intercept a huge amount of decision making around the product so that I could really be empowered to ensure that whatever we came out at the end with was more reflective, or it was as reflective as possible of end user needs and wants and dreams. And so then at that point, you start kind of like building subsets, and kind of like you start partnering with clients, because now we have in fact a product, we built it, right? We had actually a prototype. And the prototype, you see, the video in the center there is showing you basically one of the products that came out, one of the reference design that came out of this work, which was called the Llama Mountain. And Llama Mountain then was utilized to create, as a reference design, to create multiple products that were in the market, that were shipped by, for instance, Dell was one of our big partners at this moment in time, right? And so what you see here is, a story that really, in a way, went from me having a gut intuition about touch, locking in funds, finding out that actually there is an opportunity, and then the impact, however, kind of started getting in many, many different directions. And so, here is just a list, for instance, of what I see as being what the impact at the end was. I started with study on users, interfaces and on touch screen, but then who knew at the moment in time that the Ultrabook requirements would be changed? There would be like 300 million investment by Intel based on my research to really enable to have touch screens in these environments. Who knew that that would have happened? There was millions of marketing, go-to-market, different shifts in retail that had to be done, training materials to enable user-centric touch, new processes that I had to create and design to be able to intercept the timelines, which were very compressed, IP, new categories, new products, and even changes to the operating system, right? So this is to say that sometimes you start with a small gut intuition based on data, and you don't know where that is going to take you, right? It might take you very, very far. So to conclude, I have 10 tips. There's probably more, but this is 10 that I decided to up level for all of you. That hopefully would be helpful. Data is key. Very important. Arguably in every industry, I certainly can argue that very strongly in the high-tech environment. Data is important. You gotta have data. You gotta know what you're dealing with. And by data, as I said, I mean user, market, and tech. Right? So those are three important categories. You cannot just go in one direction. You need to have a better holistic understanding of the context you're playing with. So very important. Also, as I said, sometimes you can impact a lot with kind of little. What it takes is for you to be very passionate and persistent, right? And it's amazing what one person with no budget can eventually accomplish, right? Of course, you need to have allies around you, right? But you can do a lot with very little if you set your mind to it. Another one that I wanted to share with you is that, big things very rarely come from playing it safe, right? So this is not to say that you should basically go crazy and, without any kind of rationale for it. But playing it safe is really not going to lead you to any innovation, right? But now you can do big things if your data grounded is going to be a grounded, right, risk taking. And so I highly recommend that you consider that. Don't play it safe. Playing safe is not going to bring you much outcomes. Also, you can test and learn from almost everything, right? Literally anything, if you're creative, right? I didn't have an OS to test. Nobody would give me one because, of course, it was too early, right? But you can get creative with it if you kind of think about it. So just like get a bit out of the comfort zone and keep your eyes on the goal, and with some creativity, you can really actually test with end users almost anything, provided that you use a pinch of creativity. Never underestimate the importance of well-crafted protocols. This is something that I find extremely, I have to say, sometimes infuriating, I will admit it, when I go and sit in a report on a research, on user research, and then I start asking questions about the protocols. I ask questions about the methodology that was used, and I realize that the method and the decisions about how to create the protocol were wrong decisions. At this point, there's no point for me to listen to the data, because the data was not created by thinking carefully about why am I asking these questions and what is the goal and how am I going to ask those questions. So very important to sort of design the protocols and design the research upfront very well, because the outcomes otherwise are not going to be so good. You're going to have some outcomes, but they're not going to be so good. Also, don't underestimate how important it is to visualize and to tell stories, right? We're human beings. Doesn't matter which country or which dimension we come from, what we believe in. We are human beings. We've got eyes, we've got ears, we've got hearts, we've got souls, right? We've got experiences. So that is what makes us more close to each other, right? So utilize those means, because those are the ways in which we can relate to the world, and they are very powerful if you use them well. Also, remember the champion that believes in you, right? I mean, the story that I told you would have never happened if I didn't have a manager that believed in me in the first place, would have never happened if I didn't have a multitude of people that on the journey helped me out and worked with me. So, you know, it's not just about you being determined and passionate. You need to have a team around you. You need to have champions that believe in you, that support you, that are your allies. Very important to have those around all the time. Also, you need to be able to have, very hard for me to do that. I always want to do everything, but you know, you need to actually sometimes be able to ask for help, right? When at that point, I found myself traveling in multiple countries, right? And never sleeping because I was presenting my research. You know, I was basically a victim of my own success, right? And you need to ask for help. And so that's why I had to ask for help to basically go and present on my behalf, go and travel on my behalf and present to these people. You will amplify my success, and in the journey, be successful yourself, right? And so, you know, ask for help and embrace others. It's very important. They will embrace you next time. And then, you know, like sometimes the work and the methods and the purism and all the things that you know you're comfortable with don't work. And if they don't work, don't continue pushing your head on the wall. Just creating new ways of doing, stretch yourself, creating new methodologies, adapt, right? Play within. And finally, remember that what means success, sometimes people talk about success and failure and all this. Success comes in many forms and shapes, many forms and shapes. It's not just the glittery stuff, right? So remember that, you know, and in fact, arguably, I think that learning from something that didn't work is success. If you learn from something that didn't work out, is very successful, right? The learning is the success. So with that, I will kind of thank you very much. Hopefully I didn't put you to sleep. Hopefully the coffee kept you awake throughout. And now I think I'm gonna unshare my screen in case there are some questions.
I hope you can hear the clapping hands. Really, thank you, Daria, for delivering such an amazing presentation. Can you activate the camera, please? So
Yes, yes, here I am, here I am.
Thank you.
It takes a while.
So thank you for this amazing speech, and also for you know, adding a human touch to your presentation. I really love the fact that when introducing yourself, you described your personal interests, your family, hobbies, and so on. And you know, I think if we want to humanize technology, we must first attempt to humanize business. And you know, the devil is in the details, and these for me are very meaningful and important details. So thank you also for you know, transmitting so much passion and enthusiasm in what you are doing. I'm impressed by your energy, and the breadth of your competencies. It's time to take questions. I would have many, but I really would like to hear some beautiful questions from our audience. So, who is breaking the ice today? Please. Thank you, Sophia. Sorry, but you can't see the audience because of the camera is blocked on the desk. Sorry.
No problem.
Daria.
Hello.
My question is, while you are doing the prototyping, what kind of backgrounds you're using and platforms to do the prototyping generally for mostly the mock-up parts?
For software prototyping, right now, for instance, we use Figma. That's the one that we use the most for kind of the mock-ups of software type of stuff where I'm now. But when when I was working at Intel, if you're talking about hardware prototype, are you referring to the more physical prototypes?
Yes.
Yeah. For the visualizations or for the actual so the 3D renderings that I show in the video, or for the oh gosh, I need to go back in time. For that specific one, I don't remember. 3D Max. I don't remember. Honestly, it was such a long time ago. I don't remember anymore which one we were using at the moment in time. But I think perhaps was 3D Max for the video animation. And for the hardware prototype, we had our own external firm that we utilized, right? So we had in-house, we would do polystyrene mock-ups at the beginning. Then we had the vacuum formed prototypes, and then we would move more into production art pieces that would be then outsourced outside of the company.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Of course.
Any more questions?
Sorry, can I actually add just one comment, 1 second about the question earlier? And by the way, all these things that you saw, right, the hardware prototype and the software prototype, I don't want to give the impression that I was the one doing all the work, because I wasn't, right? I was working with an army at the point of industrial designers and user interface developers, right? I mean, I don't want to give the impression that I was this kind of superwoman that was doing everything, right? It was not the case at all, right? I had people that worked much better than me to do some of this stuff.
Excellent. So is there any more question from the audience? Otherwise, I have one. Okay, so thank you again, Daria. Let me take the opportunity for addressing a question which is a bit broader than the aim of your talk, but I would like to take this opportunity being in presence of an outstanding professional in this domain. So my question is, where is user experience innovation going? What are the key trends in user experience innovation? And the second question is, does the question make sense at all? So do you think that the user experience is a field that is capable of intrinsic innovation, or is a collection of practice which is affected by innovation in the domain in which this practice is applied?
Okay, very nice question. Thank you. I will start maybe with the second one, which is my kind of answer would be, I think user experience is one of the, I like to think about a table. I'm going to use a metaphor that resonates with Italians. Dinner table, right? It's a dinner table with many chairs around. And, I see as user experience being one of the chairs, right? One of the capabilities that needs to be at the table of innovation, right? So I think actually, I don't think that if you just have a good user experience innovator, you're going to have innovation. Innovation is a mix of competencies, is a mix of things that are complementary and they need each other, they're intertwined, right? So I don't think you can, right? You really need to, for instance, when I was at Intel, the case study that I showed you, for instance, we call it the team of four, initially it was team of three and then became four. So we had always at the beginning of every project, 4 people, a user experience researcher, someone that understood people, a designer, a business marketing person, and an engineer. All the time were the nucleus. So the innovation came from those 4 people as equal partners. So the first part to me, the second question to me, the answer is no, on your own, you can't do it. It's actually something that requires way more. The sum of the parts is more important than individuals, right? The first part of the question is extremely intriguing to me because it really goes into where I think is the future of our profession, arguably not just user experience, but the future of the design profession. As technology is becoming more and more virtualized and technology is becoming more and more about being led by or being driven or personalized through data analytics, right? So we are entering more and more in a world that is here from a technology standpoint, of course. I'm talking about technology, right? But if you look about how artificial intelligence is more and more influencing everything we do, like every single thing that we do, including travel, which is your topic for the year, right? So think about AI and the impact that is having on the world, and then think about how things like the metaverse, right, is starting to become more and more dominant, right? You start looking at where we're going as a society and the problems that these technologies are creating. Then I think our profession as designers and user experience people is going to morph. It's going to have to adapt. It's a completely different landscape, right? And so, I don't think the competencies that, for instance, as a designer or as a user experience I had in like 20 years ago would be efficient and effective right now, because I had to accumulate knowledge on those technologies. And those technologies got a huge impact on how you do your profession. What it means to be a designer is different in those contexts, right? And so if, I think the future of our profession is going to be one where we will need to grow, take on the challenge of this world, right? Take it on, and my, in fact, I'm giving a talk on Monday on this topic. One of my suggestion is that designers and user experience specialists are what I call the missing link, right? Because we are the one that can really translate very well between these very complex technologies, very complex, very ambiguous, very shifty, very dynamic technologies, and the end users, right? And so I think, but for us to be able to translate and to be this missing link between those two parts, we will need to grow our competencies very, very much. We will have to stretch our wings in ways that sometimes might even feel uncomfortable. I hope
thank you. A lot of wisdom and depth analysis transpiring from your words. There is one last question from our audience, please.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sophia.
Daria, hi, I'm Andrea. You were just talking about how artificial intelligence and data analytics is a challenge for us to start seeing the experience from that knowledge. It's a bit of a dichotomy when nowadays we need to, I don't know if it's a comment or maybe I'm wrong, I don't know, but like prevail human like diversity and uniqueness. So we're in a dichotomy, right? Because we're like designing experience from data analytics and artificial intelligence. However, socially and politically, we're moving towards diversity, inclusion, and like the authenticity and uniqueness of the human being. So it's really challenging,
yes.
no?
Yes.
I think
yes.
she's got the point here.
That's a very, very good question. I'm so glad. Sorry, your name is Andrea, you said?
No, I think she is a very good point.
Yeah, it's a very good point, but I wanted to know the name of the student that was speaking. Sorry. What is your name?
No, sorry.
Andrea,
I'm a
right?
girl.
Okay, Andrea. Yeah, Andrea. So that's, I thought I captured Andrea, but I wasn't sure. So Andrea, thank you so much. That's actually such a fundamental question you're asking. I'm really glad that you're asking it. I think that the way in which AI, machine learning, data sets, right, are currently, right, or traditionally being looked at, constructed, are certainly at odds, in line with what you just said, at odds with what we socially are going towards, which is really more a society where we want to be more inclusive and diverse, right? And data sets tend to be historically to lack or to be biased, let's put it this way, right? To be very clearly right, there is a lot of literature around that, because ultimately data sets, the way in which are created, are labeled by people, and if those people are all the same type of people, there you go. Now the data sets are very biased because they are basically created through the lens of a limited set of humans with a very specific set of understanding of the world. And so, I agree, it is quite a challenging, but it's not impossible to address, right? So it certainly is a huge, and in fact, this is one of the big areas where we as a profession can contribute to, right? But it's not impossible, because it's really about how you look at the technology, right? And how do you change and shift how you create those data sets, and change and shift how you design those algorithms, right? To really include the diverse perspective, and also a level of randomness, for instance, right? Because I think that another thing to take into consideration is that, of course, you don't want to have algorithms that are fueled by data sets that are completely biased. And equally, of course, you don't want to have a situation where your algorithms are so precise that keep on giving you always over and over and over and over the sense that you are such a predictable human being and keeps on giving you over and over the same answers. There are many cases where you don't want to have over and over, because life is not that predictable, and that's why life is beautiful, right? And so I think we've got a huge challenge here of really understanding the human and social dimensions, the contemporary ways in which we are living these technologies as human beings, what the technology can actually physically do and what it should do, because it's different from what the technology can do and what it should do. And they should be powered by us, what we need and where we want to go as humankind, right? So I'm really grateful for that question. It's a massive one. We can talk about it for hours and hours and hours. Maybe another time over a glass of wine.
There will be for sure another time, and we could listen you for hours, literally. And thank you also for the key take-home messages that are really useful for the opening of this master. So again, thank you, Daria. Thank you for your time and for your keynote.
Thank you again.
There is no better way to close this opening day. So have a great day. Ciao, Daria. Thank you.
Ciao. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.